Obviously, this matters in the contemporary debate because, well, the third president of the United States is accused of being a rapist, of being a sexual abuser who took advantage of a woman who was effectively owned by him. This became an incredibly important and heated political discussion, and then a heated scholarly discussion in the 1990s. So how did that come about?
Well, it was the DNA business.
Because DNA was then discovered.
I guess this was the beginning of when there were Ancestry.com. I don't know for how long they've been doing that. And suddenly you had DNA evidence, and you had DNA evidence from the male Jefferson line, and you now had Eston Hemmings' DNA, and that male Jefferson chromosome showed up in the Eston Hemmings DNA. And so people leapt to the conclusion that it was Jefferson, and Nature magazine published an article in 1998 which popularized this newly developing evidence, but it did so irresponsibly and in effect claimed that Jefferson had fathered Sally Hemings' children, when all that the DNA evidence showed was that some male in the Jefferson line had fathered Sally Hemings' children. Jefferson was, I believe, in his 60s at this time, and he had Randolph was much younger, and Randolph's sons younger still, adolescents, young men. So there were other contenders, and nobody really explored that. They just jumped to the conclusion that this was Jefferson, and there was a full-scale academic press. Annette Gordon Reed, who is now at Harvard, led this charge. And what was distinctive about Annette Gordon Reed's argument was that she did not say Jefferson was a rapist. We were now into postmodernism, and it was a narrative. And she speculated that it could have been a love relationship between the two of them, that Jefferson had fallen in love with Sally Hemings, and that they cared for each other. And this just gave it a kind of Oprah-esque, modern, romantic twist. This is a long-standing relationship that they had had, and that made people see this in a whole new light. All this was going on at the same time that the Monica Lewinsky business was coming to light.
I was going to say 1998, somebody called Jefferson, president,
William
allegations
Jefferson
of rape,
Clinton.
taking advantage of somebody in their employment. This is all connected.
And that was consensual sex, and what they wanted to say was Jefferson had a slave in his possession, and he was carrying on with her. So really, we shouldn't be all that exercised by what Bill Clinton was doing.
So I mean, it's an extraordinary thing for
It was very convenient.
It was convenient for Democrats at the time who wanted to excuse Bill Clinton.
Yes, to suddenly now have DNA evidence, and I was on the Scholars Commission that looked at all this evidence. We spent a very long time examining the evidence, reading the arguments of Annette Gordon Reed and her band of colleagues who were pushing this line. And the best we could come up with was that it might have been possible for Jefferson to have, you couldn't rule it out, but you could not make authoritative claims that he was the father, and there were good reasons to think that there were much better contenders for who the paternity claim should be hung around.
It's very unusual that a current day scandal and a historic event should have ended up being so intertwined, isn't it? I mean, and the commission you describe, and effectively, the conclusions became political in the 1990s.
The reason that it that I got interested in it was that I was writing a book on Jefferson, but principally I thought nobody cared about his honor. I mean, that you could just make idle accusations against him and say that he had fathered slaves, fathered children with a slave. If you didn't have real evidence to prove that, you should be a lot more measured in your scholarly judgments. And so it was, for me, it was a question of defending Jefferson's honor. If it had turned out that he was, I was not hell bent on refuting it. I just didn't like to see the way in which people jumped to conclusions about it.